The day Harold Voss was thrown out of his own building, it was raining. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind of rain that arrives on cue in movies. The cold, indifferent kind. A gray Tuesday in November. The sky the color of wet concrete, and the water coming down in thin, relentless needles that found the back of your neck no matter which way you turned. Harold stood at the entrance of the Voss building on Meridian Street. He had never liked the name, had argued against it, lost, and he adjusted the plastic grocery bag in his left hand and looked up at the facade, the way a man looks at something he built with his own hands and is proud of but would never say so out loud. He was 74 years old. He wore a tan parka that had been washed so many times the lining had separated at one shoulder and made a soft rustling sound when he moved. His boots were good, always good boots. That was the one rule he had kept from his father. But they were old, and the leather had darkened at the toe in a way that no amount of polish fully corrected anymore. He had a paper coffee cup from the diner 2 blocks east. He had reading glasses on a cord around his neck. He looked to anyone not paying close attention, like a man with nowhere particular to be and no strong opinion about it. He pushed through the lobby door. The lobby of the Voss building was the thing Harold was most quietly proud of. Not the 47 units above it, not the underground parking or the rooftop terrace he'd convinced the city to approve after 3 hearings, but the lobby. 14-foot ceilings, floors in a pale limestone he'd sourced himself from a supplier in Indiana after rejecting 4 samples. A long wooden bench along the east wall, real oak, no veneer, because Harold had always believed that a good lobby gave people a place to sit and think before they went up into their lives. There was a single potted olive tree in the corner that he watered himself on the first Tuesday of every month, which is why he was there. The new building manager saw him the moment the door opened. Her name was Cassandra Price. She was 31, recently promoted from a larger property management firm across town, and she had been in the position for exactly 6 weeks. She wore her badge on a lanyard and her blazer like armor, and she had spent those 6 weeks making changes, small ones, the kind that announce a new administration without requiring permission. New sign-in protocol at the desk, new vendor list. A decision announced in a building-wide email to upgrade the lobby aesthetic. The olive tree, she had noted in a separate message to the building's listed management contact, was inconsistent with the modern minimalist direction she was pursuing. She had not received a reply to that message. She had taken the silence as agreement. She watched Harold cross the lobby toward the tree, and she felt the specific irritation of someone who has just cleaned a room and watched someone walk into it with muddy boots. She was across the floor before he reached it. "Excuse me." Her voice carried the practiced authority of someone who had learned that volume was not the same as confidence, but was still working on the difference. "Can I help you?" Harold set his grocery bag on the bench. Inside it was a small watering can, a pair of pruning shears, and a cloth for dusting the leaves. He had been watering this tree for 11 years. "Just the tree," he said. Cassandra looked at the bag, then at him. The parka, the boots, the coffee cup, the reading glasses on the cord. Her face arranged itself into something that was trying to be polite and settling for patient. "Sir, this is a private residential building. Are you a tenant?" "No." "Then I'm going to need to ask you to—" "I'm not a vendor either, if that's the next question." Harold took the watering can out of the bag. It was a small green metal one, dented at the spout. He had bought it at a hardware store in 1987. He did not think about this. He just picked it up. Cassandra's patience finished its conversion to something else. "Sir," she stepped between him and the tree, "I don't know how you got in here, but I need you to leave, immediately. If you have a delivery or a service request, you need to go through the management office on the 2nd floor and schedule an appointment. This lobby is not a public space, and you cannot just walk in off the street. Harold looked at her. He was a man who had learned, over 74 years, that most arguments are not about the thing they appear to be about, and that the fastest way to lose them is to start talking before you understand what the other person actually believes. What Cassandra Price believed very clearly was that he did not belong here. That was the whole argument. Everything else was decoration. "The tree needs water," he said. "I will have our maintenance team see to the plant." She gestured toward the door. "I need you to leave or I will call security." Harold stood still for a moment. Then he put the watering can back in the bag. He picked up his coffee. He looked once at the olive tree. It was slightly dry at the base, he noted, and one of the lower branches had yellowed in a way that suggested it had been moved away from the window. And then he walked back toward the lobby entrance. At the door, he paused. "That branch!" He pointed without turning. "The low one on the left. It needs more light. If you move the pot back 6 inches toward the window, it'll sort itself out in about 2 weeks." Cassandra did not respond. Harold walked out into the rain. He stood under the building's overhang, a detail he had added at the last moment during construction, because he believed buildings should give people a place to stand. When the weather turned, and he took out his phone, it was an older model, the screen slightly cracked at one corner. He found the number he wanted and pressed call. "Margaret," he said when she answered. "It's Harold. I need the file on the Meridian Street property." Margaret Osei had been Harold's attorney for 22 years. She had the voice of a woman who had heard everything and been surprised by very little. "Which file?" "All of it. The ownership documents, the deed, the incorporation papers for the LLC, the maintenance records, the original building permits." He paused. "And the employment contract for the current building manager." "I'd like to read it." A short silence. "Harold, what happened?" He looked at the rain coming down on Meridian Street, at the limestone facade he had chosen, at the lobby visible through the glass doors, where Cassandra Price was already on the phone, probably to security, probably explaining that she had just removed an unknown man from the premises. "Someone moved my tree," he said. "I'd like to have a conversation about it." Margaret made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "I'll pull everything." "When do you need it?" "Tomorrow morning would be fine." He picked up his bag. "Actually, pull the email records too. The management contact for the building. I understand she's been sending messages that haven't received replies. That's because the management contact for the building is the LLC's registered address in Grand Rapids. Nobody checks that inbox except me." "I know," Harold said. "That's what I'd like to talk about." He hung up. He looked at the building one more time. 47 units, 14-foot lobby ceilings. An olive tree he had carried up 2 flights of stairs on a hand truck in 2013 because the elevator had not been installed yet, and he had not wanted to wait. He had designed this building when he was 63 years old. After 30 years of architecture that had mostly been other people's visions built carefully and without complaint. And it was the first time he had built something exactly as he had imagined it and put nothing of anyone else's preference in it except the bench along the east wall, which his late wife had suggested and which was, he had long since admitted, the best thing in the room. He walked back to the diner for a second coffee because the first one had gone cold, and he sat at the counter and read the newspaper. And he did not think about Cassandra Price again that day. She, however, spent most of the afternoon thinking about him. Not because she felt uncertain about what she'd done. She didn't. She had removed an unknown individual from a private building. That was correct. That was the job. But something about the exchange had left a small splinter in the back of her mind, and she kept returning to it without meaning to. The watering can. The pruning shears. The way he had looked at the tree as he left, not wounded, not angry, but the way a contractor looks at work he knows has been done slightly wrong and is calculating quietly what it will take to correct it. She mentioned it to the front desk assistant before she left that evening. That older man earlier. Does he come in often? The assistant, a young man named Carlos, who had worked the desk for 3 years and knew every tenant by name and half of them by grocery preference, looked at her for a moment with an expression she could not quite read. "Mr. Voss?" he said. "I don't know his name." Carlos was quiet for a moment in the way people are quiet when they are deciding how much to say. "He comes in on the first Tuesday of the month," he said finally. "For the tree. Does he have a tenant connection? A family member in the building?" Carlos looked at the lobby, at the bench, at the limestone floor, at the olive tree in the corner with the slightly yellowed lower branch. "You could say that," he said. The meeting happened the following Thursday. Cassandra had been told by her firm's regional director that the ownership entity for the Meridian Street property had requested a formal management review. This was unusual. She prepared for it the way she prepared for everything, thoroughly, confidently, with a detailed presentation on the improvements she had implemented and the modernization plan she intended to propose. New vendor contracts, lower maintenance costs, a lobby redesign concept with mood boards she had assembled herself. She had done good work in 6 weeks. She was proud of it. She walked into the second-floor conference room at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning, ready to demonstrate that. Harold was already there. He was wearing a different jacket, a dark navy one, wool well kept, and he had the same reading glasses on the same cord. There was a woman to his left who introduced herself as Margaret Osei, attorney. There was a manila folder on the table in front of him, thick with paper, the edges of the documents inside tabbed in blue and yellow. He had a pen in his hand that he was not using. He was looking out the window at Meridian Street. Cassandra sat down. She opened her laptop. She began her introduction. Harold let her finish. Then he opened the folder. What followed was not a confrontation in any dramatic sense. Harold Voss was not a dramatic man. He spoke quietly and specifically. He identified, document by document, 7 management decisions made in 6 weeks that violated the terms of the property management agreement, including the removal of approved vendors without ownership notification, the proposed lobby redesign initiated without ownership approval, and an email to the management contact address. He had printed this one out and placed it in a separate tab, requesting permission to remove the lobby plant, which had been purchased by the ownership entity and was listed as a fixed asset in the building's inventory. He had not received a reply to that email, he noted, because he had not checked that address. That was an oversight on his part. He acknowledged it plainly. He would not let it happen again. Cassandra said, "I don't understand." "Who are you?" Harold set the ownership documents on the table and slid them across to her. The deed. The LLC registration. The original building permits signed by Harold Voss, architect and principal owner. "I own the building," he said. "I also designed it. The lobby floor is limestone from a supplier in Greencastle, Indiana. The bench along the east wall was my wife's idea, and the olive tree in the corner is 11 years old, which is why it requires specific care rather than general maintenance." He said all of this without heat, without the satisfaction of a man winning a point, the way a man explains something true that he would have been just as happy not to have needed to explain. Cassandra looked at the documents. She looked at him. She thought about the rain, the parka, the watering can, the way he had stopped at the door and told her exactly how to fix the branch. She had spent 6 weeks modernizing a building for a man she had thrown out of it in the rain. "The tree?" she said. Finally, because it was the only thing she could make herself say. "It needs to go back to the window," Harold said. He was already standing, already picking up his folder. 6 inches ought to do it. "Give it 2 weeks." He left the documents on the table for her to review. He said that Margaret would be in touch regarding the management agreement and that he hoped they could resolve things efficiently because he disliked paperwork nearly as much as he disliked wet boots and cold coffee. He went down to the lobby, moved the pot 6 inches toward the window himself, and watered the tree. Then he sat on the bench his wife had suggested and finished his coffee and watched the street for a while, the way a man sits in a room he built and does not need to announce that it belongs to him because the room already knows. Outside, the rain had stopped. It was a Tuesday,